Tonight, once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT Show. Hey, we're getting back into the Bryan Kohberger case. It's been a minute. It's been a minute since we talked about Kohberger. He pled guilty not too long ago. Well, a bit over a month ago now, I guess. Maybe even longer than that. It's been a while. He pled guilty in the quadruple homicide of Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, and Kaylee Goncalves back in November 13, 2022, when he entered into the 1122 King Road home through the back sliding glass door. Horrible thing that occurred. And, you know, the true crime community was somewhat divided. You know, you had some folks that thought he was innocent, some folks that didn't. And in the end, he did take accountability. He pled guilty. In a way, in my opinion, probably to save his own skin, you know, to avoid the death penalty. And he is now serving, 4 life-term sentences and in an Idaho maximum state prison. And so there's been some information that's been dropped here recently. There's been some documents that have been dropped that we're going to go over and what those things mean and what they meant for the case. We're going to also look at there was a ruling. We haven't, there's quite a bit to catch up on. We're just going to talk on a little bit just to kind of get us caught up on it. But a ruling was made on the pictures and the videos when it pertained to some of the victims. We're going to talk about that and what that means. And Lifetime has already started with their making of a movie of the case. And we're going to talk about the actor that they chose and what this implication means. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You guys know what to do. Without further ado, let's break it down. All right, and as I said, it's been a while since we've been talking about the Bryan Kohberger case. So I wanted to touch on this. We didn't talk about it before. Idaho judge bars the release of graphic photos from the crime scene where Bryan Kohberger killed 4. It says here, Idaho judge is blocking the release of some graphic photos taken by investigators after Bryan Kohberger killed 4 University of Idaho students in 2022. Second District Judge Mellon Marshall made the ruling Wednesday, saying the dissemination and of incredibly disturbing photos across the internet, where the victim's family might inadvertently see them, is unwarranted invasion of privacy. I applaud this. You know, I didn't think it was going to get done. You know, my thoughts of what was going to happen and where my heart was in 2 different places. My heart was, I was really hoping that this was going to be the outcome. You know, I was really hoping that they were going to do this. In my mind, I didn't think it was going to happen, mainly because there's been so many other cases where things have happened and those crime scenes have not been censored by any means. And so to me, I was like, I really hope it goes in this way, but I'm not expecting it to. And to my surprise, it happened. Will it stay this way? I don't know. You know, I'm sure some news media outlets out there are going to try to appeal this ruling or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's already in the works. I hope it doesn't happen. I sincerely hope it doesn't. I hope nobody appeals, and I hope it's left as is. And maybe perhaps that this kind of sets some sort of precedent for, you know, crime scenes in the future. I know that, you know, certain people want to get, you know, involved in this, and they like looking up certain aspects of cases and get really into it once a case has been closed. But I do think that there should be a sense of privacy when it comes to certain things. You know what I mean? And so the edited aspect or the censored aspect of the victims, I think is a great ruling. I think it worked out great. She ordered the city of Moscow to black out portions of the images and not to show any portions of the victim's body or blood immediately surrounding them. But the judge said the public also has an interest in seeing the investigation records, and so other photos, videos, and documents connected to the case can be released, including videos showing distraught friends of the victims on the mornings where their bodies were found. So, all in all, I thought it was a great ruling. And I'm glad it went in this direction. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about before we get into some other stuff is into the witness list is that Miles Murray is going to be casted as Bryan Kohberger in the Lifetime Idaho student murder movie. So this is the guy pictured next to Bryan Kohberger. They're not trying to make it look exactly like him. So if you're looking for somebody that looks exactly like Kohberger, I'm sure you're disappointed, but I think it's close enough, and it depends on his acting too, right? Not what his appearance is. So I think they got somebody that's looks close enough. I'm sure if he cuts his hair a little bit shorter and things of that nature, he'll look even closer. But I'm not familiar with this actor, so I don't know anything about him. What movies he's been in or anything like that. I've never seen him before. So the only thing I can go on is his appearance. But he's not as creepy looking here, but movie magic and makeup and things of that nature can do a lot of things. You know what I'm saying? They can make somebody look insane just by darkening, around the eyes and things of that nature, which I'm fairly positive they're going to do a lot of that with him. But yeah, his headshot, obviously, he does not look as creepy as Bryan Kohberger. So this goes on to say, Lifetime has a new ripped from the headlines movie in the works about the Idaho student murders with Miles Murray, Untamed, cast as Bryan Kohberger. I've never seen Untamed. I don't know what that is. From the team behind the Murdaugh Murders, the movie, the Idaho Murders, working title, is based on a true story that took place November 13, 2022 in Moscow, Idaho. And so, yeah, they'll look alike once the hair is changed. I think so. Lots of eyebrows will be needed. Well, I mean, his eyebrows aren't, they're pretty thick on their own, and I'm sure he's, well taken care of when it comes to as an actor. I'm sure they take care of the eyes and the makeup and all that other stuff, especially for like a headshot. That's what directors and movie makers and stuff like that are going to be using to, in some form or fashion, cast their actors. And so, I'm sure he's trying to get other roles as well. But I'm interested. I'm going to be watching it. I'm not really I couldn't say I've watched too many Lifetime movies in my life. But I'll say this: I'll probably watch this one, and then we'll talk about it. We'll talk about how close they got to, what the evidence is compared to what we know. Because again, we don't know everything. I could say that we probably know majority of things now that the case is closed and so much information has been dropped out or put out there. But we don't know everything. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of drama added to the movie as well, and it'll be fun to kind of pick out what it is what is dramatized, what is not dramatized, things of that nature. There was a movie that me and Steelers fan, the wife, we ended up seeing not too long ago, and I can't remember the title of it, but it was based off of a true story, and there was a guy who was arrested, convicted, and put to death here in Texas for the death of his own kids in a fire. Now, apparently, and after the fact, after his death, the real part about this is that there's a possibility that he didn't start the fire, and that the techniques that they used to determine that it was started by, for instance, an accelerant and something that you could tell is arson, ended up not being the case. It could have been an accident. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily it was or it wasn't. There was some suspicious behavior behind it, while the house was burning and his kids were inside. He was allegedly moving his car, or supposedly, according to witnesses, more concerned about his car next to the burning trailer than his kids. But, again, there's a lot of that movie that's dramatized. In that movie, when he's being sentenced to death, or when the death aspect of it is being fulfilled, she's driving and she gets into a car accident and ends up being in a wheelchair. Spoiler alert, by the way. And in real life, she was in the wheelchair before. And so there's going to be some parts that are going to be drama, and there's going to be some parts that are going to be not as accurate. I hope nobody takes offense to that. I know some people are probably going to be like, oh, it's bull crap. This didn't happen. That didn't happen. Yeah. The aspect of it is also entertainment. And so they're going to add some drama to it, 100% in my opinion. But I'll be interested to see it and not necessarily pick it apart, but do a what they got right, what they got wrong type of situation. You know what I'm saying? And so, all right, let's get into the newest documents. So these are the amended notices to compliance and sealed motion to sealed states amended witness list. So this is the witness list for the state. There's a lot of names on here. A lot of names we're gonna recognize. I mean, you're gonna see Jack DeCore, Jack Showalter. You'll see Dylan Mortenson, Bethany Funke, and everybody that is involved in it, the officers, etc. Some couple of names that are interesting, and a lot of news media is kind of putting this together too, where apparently after this witness list was dropped and Bryan Kohberger had it, it was redacted to all of us, but not to Bryan Kohberger. He saw his sister's name on here, and so they're trying to, mainstream media is alluding to the fact that maybe perhaps him seeing his sister on the state's witness list was a reason behind, or one of the reasons why he pled guilty. It could be. I don't doubt that that's a possibility. But Amanda Kohberger is on the witness list now. There's a couple of different reasons why she is and why she could be on the witness list. Now, Bill Thompson had mentioned that, none of the family members really had anything for their case. So I don't really like Bill Thompson that much as a prosecutor because of some of the things he said. But taking that in mind, what is it that they could have had her on the witness list for? The one thing that stood out to me was obviously the purchase of the K-bar knife. I'm assuming that Amanda Kohberger may have resided at the residence with her parents for her to have been aware of the purchase and or Bryan Kohberger, or at least seeing Bryan Kohberger retrieve those items. Because when you go through the documents, it was super specific about when it was that Bryan Kohberger ordered the item and received it. Now, yes, they probably got some of that from, from his. Well, here's the thing. I think that was before some of the warrants. They were still getting warrants out there. So to me, I had always wondered if they were able to get a warrant for that specific time frame from Amazon, because Amanda Kohberger, or one of Bryan Kohberger's family members, was aware of the purchase. Now, they had found, so when the K-bar knife was purchased on Amazon, it was purchased alongside some other items. Those other items were found in Bryan Kohberger's car. And so they know that, so let me take two steps back. And so what law enforcement did is they ordered the same items that Bryan Kohberger did to ensure that they were delivered in the same package. Meaning that because they were aware that Bryan Kohberger ordered these items and that they would have came together packaged, and that there were some of those items in his possession, that must mean that he took possession of that package. And you're probably going to ask, Amanda Kohberger to make sure that she didn't pick it up. She didn't take it, because at the end of the day, the only thing that you can really say is that somebody from that account ordered it and it was delivered. You do kind of also have to ask, the rest of the persons that were in the household, well, did you pick it up? Just because Bryan ordered it doesn't mean that he received the package. Did you receive it? Did you see it? Those type of things. So I immediately thought that was what it was referencing. But there's some other aspects to this as well. Howard Bloom had mentioned on our channel and on in articles that he had written that his family, his being Bryan Kohberger's family members were suspicious, especially one of his sisters. Now, he also says, and I believe this might be the sister. I could be wrong. I got a 50-50 chance, right? Because he got two. But one of his sisters, according to Howard Bloom, was writing a book. I don't know if this is the same one. If it is, it would make somewhat of sense if she was actually divulging more information than what maybe Bill Thompson was alluding to when he was talking about their possible testimony. And why would Bill Thompson say something like that at that point? Well, Bryan Kohberger had just kind of go off base a little bit. Bryan Kohberger already admitted guilt, and one of the agreements was that he wasn't going to plea out. So do you think Bill Thompson, and I ask you guys, put it in the comment section, put it in the live, do you think maybe Bill Thompson was saying that we didn't really get a lot of information from the Kohberger family in efforts to maybe prevent them from getting a lot of backlash for knowing something or anything? And in the end, maybe perhaps they did cooperate, or at least Amanda cooperated. So, if she didn't act right away, but she cooperated after Bryan Kohberger's arrest and said some things, whether it was her suspicion or, some of the things that Bryan Kohberger was doing, whether it was cleaning his car multiple times, some of the odd behaviors he was having, such as wearing gloves and things like that. If she was helping them out, I could see Bill Thompson throwing her a bone and saying, all right, they really weren't going to say anything because they really didn't know anything, just so that there isn't this backlash against them. I wouldn't put that past Bill Thompson either. Just my opinion. What do you guys think of that possibility? Because I think it's very possible that that's what happened here. But according to Howard Bloom, Amanda Kohberger, or one of Bryan Kohberger's sisters, I'm assuming it's Amanda, and this is my opinion and speculation based on what Howard Bloom had written and said, maybe had suspicions about Bryan, even searched his vehicle, things of that nature. I wonder if those things would have been brought up into court. And then there's also the theft of the cell phone. Back when Bryan Kohberger, I believe, was late teens, I think 19 or so, he ended up stealing a cell phone from his sister and tried to pawn it off or sell it at a kiosk. And there's been a friend of his who was aware of him selling the phone, wasn't aware of whose it was, but said that the whole purpose of it was to score some smack. So that could be, there. But, it's just really interesting as to what the possibilities are. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think of what the possibilities were on this. Truth Exposed says, could have questioned her on if he ever caught peeping on his sister. Apparently he liked to watch people. I kind of heard something like that, but I don't know. Now, the other name I saw on here, but no, that's the wrong name. What a name I did not see on here, and I want to make sure that I didn't see it and I didn't miss it. But I don't see Nayoung Ko. Now I see Nayin Koi, and maybe I don't think he got it wrong, because I think I remember seeing her name written on a board in his office. And so she was the other teacher's assistant that Bryan Kohberger knew. They lived in the same apartment complex, and she suspected that he had had broken into her home, moved some things around. He had set up some cameras, and she started to suspect him being Bryan Kohberger again, putting maybe perhaps watching her through those cameras. Now, Bryan Kohberger's witness list is a lot smaller. And Amanda Kohberger is the second person on that list. So Amanda Kohberger was going to testify for the state and the defense. Now, the order here, it says the order is not necessarily mean anything, but just point of example that she is on here. I don't know I mean, I'm going to assume that because, she would have been brought up by the state and they were going to be bringing up some of the negative things about Bryan Kohberger. I assume at that point, Ann Taylor probably could have kind of, on cross, get out whatever it is that she wanted to get out during whatever she would have used Amanda Kohberger for during when they were calling witnesses. And so I wonder if they were really surprised because they have her here too. Interesting. Hey, Can Opener, how's it going? Good game the other day. Good game. Let's see. Character witness. Yeah. No, I that's what I was thinking too. Character witness, but like, I think if they thought that they were going to utilize her as a witness, maybe they're not putting her on their witness list. I don't know. Let's see. They also have. And see, here's the other thing. All the other Kohbergers are together. Marianne Kohberger, Melissa Kohberger, Michael Kohberger Jr. Why is she by herself? It says that, Bryan Kohberger and through his attorney records will call the following witness to trial, although not necessarily in the same order as listed. I wonder what this means, if there's anything there, like why it's like this. You know what I mean? Amanda Kohberger, and then over here you have the other Kohbergers. It's weird. I'm just curious why they did it that way. And then you have Catherine Ramsland, which Catherine Ramsland did an interview with Brian Ensign shortly after Bryan Kohberger pled guilty and things like that. And we hadn't known everything yet. We knew a little bit of things, but not everything. Since then, a lot of redacted stuff had came out. I want to go back and watch that interview and see what she says now, knowing what we've known about Bryan Kohberger's behavior at WSU with several other, female students, some professors, other administrative members who were female, who I think one professor who wrote on Ted Bundy that Bryan Kohberger didn't agree with and was very foul against her. So we'll now take a look at what she said then and see how it relates to now. Know what I mean? And Chloe, I'm glad you're here. I didn't see you earlier. Maybe you answered this. It's alphabetical. Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. It's alphabetical. There you go. That's why it's A over here and M over here. They're all with M. Thank you. Good. I got it wrong. That's why they're in order like that. All righty. So let's pull that up. And we'll listen to this. And then, like, kind of with everything that we know, we'll break it down. So this is Catherine Ramsland, professor for Bryan Kohberger at DeSales.
How did you first meet Bryan Kohberger? What classes of yours was he in?
Okay, I want to be just clear that I'm still within the FERPA limitations that
I do have this sped up.
And student information, so I will talk within that. I met him in the fall of 2018 when he came to DeSales University. He had an associate's degree and he was going to get into our 4-year program as a psychology major. He selected the forensic track, which made him an advisee for me because I managed the forensic track. And he was also in my class that semester.
And Dr. Ramsland talks about FERPA. I should have mentioned that. There's a law, it's a federal law, I believe, that she is not allowed to talk about certain aspects of a student, their grades, certain parts of their academic life. It's almost like a HIPAA. So she's going to tell us what she can, but unless Bryan Kohberger signs off, she's legally not allowed to talk about certain elements of his academic career. So just keep that in mind if there's some things that Dr. Ramsland can't answer. What was your perception of him?
He seemed like eager to be in the classroom. He was polite. He was respectful, intense, and curious. And there was no reason for me to think that he was anything other than someone who was really interested in this potential career.
All right, polite and a bunch of other things that we didn't hear out of WSU, right? So what does this say, right? I don't think this says that Dr. Ramsland is lying by any means. I think this has more to do with with like Bryan Kohberger's surroundings, maybe perhaps not having his father, his mother around, those type of things, amplified his behavior. I think he was perhaps able to contain himself a little bit more. But one of the things that has always bothered me about Bryan Kohberger in this case is the fact that, a lot of people will say, well, something happened at WSU. It was because he was losing his job. Somebody turned him down, all these other things. The problem is the balaclava mask and the K-bar knife and the knife sheath and the sharpener were all purchased in March of 2022 while he was still attending DeSales University. Now, before he even gets out there, these are the things that Bryan Kohberger goes through, which would be indicative which would make you believe that he was planning something or had nefarious thoughts or things going on. He purchases the K-bar knife, the knife sheath, when he's graduating or just about to graduate from DeSales University. So he's getting his master's degree. This is the high of his life. He's, I think that there is one thing that happens. One of his friends growing up does pass away around this time, and due to an overdose. Saba, what I think was his last name. And I think it was also like his neighbor. So, could that have, been the, that last straw that kind of got him to flip over to being completely crazy? Possibly. But, during the time and when he purchased the K-bar knife should have been, a happier moment. He had overcame a lot of his demons, allegedly. I don't know if he did or not, but supposedly he stopped and kicked heroin and, doing things the right way. He got a master's degree, etc. And so he purchases the K-bar knife. He purchases a balaclava mask. Now he develops a Reddit. Now he is using it under the guise of being a student at DeSales University, and that the survey is for the purpose of a report or his thesis from out there. Problem with that is that when he entered in the Reddit survey, it was near his graduation. And the second problem with it is that it's one thing to put it out there and then, all right, because they banned it. They took it down. And you graduated. Your teacher says, hey, it's fine. You ran out of time, whatever the case may be. But he didn't let it go. And there was no purpose for him to go back to it. He went back and he went to Reddit multiple times asking so that his post would be public and to be not banned, because it was being taken down. And I think his account was being either banned or it was just being deleted. And so he wanted to have it up, and he was arguing through the month of June. Now he didn't move out there until July. So this is while he's still out there at DeSales University. And what that Reddit survey was that he wanted to speak with other violent criminals who had committed violent crimes. And he wanted to know everything about what they did with the case, how they chose their victims, what made them choose their victims, what their feelings were, the whole 9 yards, right? The emotions behind everything. Now, under the guise of a report for DeSales that he's already graduated for. So all of this happens before he even moves out to Washington. So I don't know. I struggle with how Dr. Catherine Ramsland didn't see the signs, but I wasn't there. And obviously Bryan Kohberger, it was a different circumstance. He was living with his parents. He was going back and forth. I'm sure he had some sort of peeping Tom type of things going on over there as well. It just may have been more hidden because he had to drive all the way back home, and his parents were on him and things like that. Most likely, I'm assuming they knew his comings and goings, things like that. And I'm assuming that if he didn't show up, at night, because it was a bit of a drive. So I'm assuming that if he went all the way out there and didn't show up till late at night, that his mom, being as close as what they seemed they were going to be, she would have noticed that. And so maybe it's because he was finally out on his own that he, just kind of broke loose, so to speak. But I wonder how it is that he was able to hide his mask with somebody like Dr. Catherine Ramsland.
Was there anything looking back now that was strange about him, or that you noticed?
When I look back, there really isn't anything that stood out to me. I think when you're a teacher, your instinct is to accept students at face value. You don't, start with suspicions or, and there really weren't any red flags. He was always really quite respectful and grateful. He would thank me for things. He was attentive. He would do the work. I didn't have any concerns.
What I think it was 4 classes that you taught him in. What were those classes?
There were 3 undergraduate courses in the forensic track that I taught, and he was in all of them. Well, one was Introduction to Forensic Psychology. Another was my death investigation class, which was called Psychological Sleuthing. And the third one was called Dangerous Minds, the Psychology of Antisocial Behavior. And then he got into the graduate program in criminal justice for a master's degree, and he took a course with me called Behavioral Criminology.
Is there anything, Dr. Ramsland, when you look back and you think of...
I think it's safe to say that Bryan Kohberger took more classes with Dr. Ramsland than any professor that he did at WSU. It's weird, right? That he was able to hold that mask while he was at DeSales for a long period of time and for extended amount of exposure, and Bryan Kohberger seemed like a kind of guy that wanted to push himself on people. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is where Professor John Snyder on Fridays was getting really irritated with him because he would show up and just talk about the most randomest of things. And he felt that it was that it was Bryan Kohberger's need for control, and that he knew it was something he didn't like, and he would do it on purpose. And, I just wonder why those things weren't seen here. Maybe it was just taken the wrong way. Maybe what John Snyder saw as Bryan Kohberger being a pest, so to speak, always coming by and asking questions. Dr. Ramsland may have seen that same behavior as admiration or curiosity and somebody that wants to move forward. So, I guess perspective would make a difference in this as well.
About the curriculum of those classes, and not getting into his specific experience, but when you think about what you taught in those classes, that you think, oh my gosh, he may have used that in what he's now accused of doing here in Idaho.
Well, the antisocial behavior course involves serial killers and mass murderers, and we do a lot of case analysis. I use two books that I wrote. One was written with the BTK killer, whom you just mentioned, and his decision process and the crimes and how he thought about them and felt about them and what was it like for him, to be caught. So that's a very intense book. And also I have one called The Mind of a Murderer, which was about various behavioral experts over the past century who interviewed killers, mass murderers, and serial killers to get as close as possible, spending a lot of time with them to get as close as possible to their process of becoming a criminal. And so he would have been exposed to that. I think now looking back, I would look at maybe some of the things that interested him as being, something that gives me pause. But we always have to think about, we all know, everyone in this field, forensic psychology and criminology, know that we could have students who might become offenders. But we also know that the vast majority of our students will not, and will instead go into a field like law enforcement, FBI, Secret Service, that make the world better, that protect us. So we know that there's always a risk that we're attracting somebody who wants to do something terrible. Hoping we won't ever have that, but in my case, I did.
Can you say, Dr. Ramsland, what it was looking back now?
And for Dr. Catherine Ramsland, it's a situation where, if somebody is getting attracted for the wrong reasons, right? Like Bryan Kohberger may have been, it's going to be the high profile, doctors like Dr. Ramsland that these serial or these weird offenders are going to be attracting, that she's going to be attracting, right? It's not going to be your random, criminology professor at the local community college. Not saying that there's anything wrong with the, professor there, but there's not that much of exposure. There's not a lot of almost fame, I would say, given the fact that you have like Dr. Ramsland working with some prolific serial killers and some well known, that have been out there in the media and high profile crimes. And so, you're probably going to end up not everybody that's going to be taking her class, obviously, is going to be like this. I believe that persons like this isn't as common or whatnot, the serial offender type, the crazy psychopath type of person that can go out there and commit this crime. I'm not saying that they, psychopaths and those things don't exist, but the complete monster like Bryan Kohberger I would assume there's a lot less of them than good people, is what I'm trying to say. And so, as far and few in between that they are, I wouldn't be surprised if you had some people that were trying to get close. Now, does it have to be Ramsland? No, of course not. I mean, somebody could just be interested in the criminology aspect and taking like I said, the community college aspect just to be a low profile, not to get caught. So, when you think about it from both angles, it could be, but, and it brings up this question that like Kim asked. Imagine if BK got put into the Pullman Police Department. That would have been bad. What would we have probably have seen or heard or known? So he probably would have obviously done his stalking. I think he would have had an opportunity to be more of like a stalker, especially at night and stuff like that. If he would have, now I don't think he would have ever been like in his own police vehicle or things of that nature. But he also would have picked up a lot of things and how investigations are done within that specific department. Now, with that said, that's not what got him. It wasn't the Pullman or the Moscow Police Department that got Bryan Kohberger. It was the feds. And even if he would have committed a crime like this, being a police officer, the feds still probably would have caught him, regardless of his profession. But yeah, he would have been in a position of power that he probably would have obviously abused, in my opinion. I mean, that's the other thing too. Maybe perhaps the reason behind a lot of the behavior aspect in WSU versus DeSales is the fact that he was in a position of authority at WSU and not a position of authority at DeSales. So maybe that did get to his head to a certain extent, and that also maybe brought to light the monster that he really is. Know what I mean?
That sort of raises your eyebrows specifically in terms of things in the class?
I think just the idea of wanting to study offenders and what their thought process was, how they felt about their crimes, wanting to study that, and then finding out that this is a person who then is now saying he's guilty of doing these things. I have to look at the framework of what I taught and wonder, did I inspire him in some way? Did I, but I can't second guess that, because I may have inspired somebody else to become an FBI agent.
Yeah, it's funny she says that, because there was a little bit of a war going on between Catherine Ramsland and some of the folks that Dr. Catherine Ramsland knows, and Howard Bloom. Because Howard Bloom said that to a certain extent that he felt that part of Bryan Kohberger's motive was that he was trying to gain either the attention or the admiration of Dr. Ramsland. And he used the analogy of the person that attempted to take, I believe it was President Ronald Reagan's life. I can't remember the guy's name, but he did it because he was trying to win the affection of Jodie Foster, an actress. And it's not like Jodie Foster knew who the guy was or what he was planning or any of those things. It was all in that dude's crazy mind. And so he was saying to a certain extent that maybe Bryan Kohberger was feeling inspired or admiration or more for Dr. Ramsland. And it seemed like so many people were coming down upon him for having that statement. And it's funny because Dr. Ramsland says that something similar to that right now, that she may have inspired him. And to me, I think it'd be less likely that he was not trying to grasp her attention or her, or that she didn't pop into his mind as part of something. And what I mean by that is, like, when you look at BTK or you look at the Zodiac, those guys that committed their crimes, those were sexual in nature. Now, they also antagonized the public and by going out, and the media and law enforcement by going out there and putting things in codes or writing letters and things of that nature to the media. And so they taunted them. And was that the reason behind why they did what they did? Was the motive behind their murders to taunt the media and everybody else? No, it was the sexual fantasy, sexual nature of the crime that they felt for the crime. That was like a tremor to an earthquake, right? Or an aftershock, something that's something to get off of, but not the actual thing itself. Like, I could see if this guy was, I'm the smartest person in the world or in the room, whatever. Nobody can outsmart me. I just committed the perfect crime, blah, 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 blah. I can see how he would have been interested in Ramsland picking up the case, being interested in the case, seeing what she would have thought about the profile that she would have created and how much it closely matches to him, and if she could have figured it out. I wonder if that was a part of his maybe he didn't think that she could figure out. I think he thought that he would stump her, and that was a part of his fantasy as well. It was an attitude, not the thing. So I just found it kind of not funny, but so much back and forth went on between Dr. Ramsland and some of the folks that she knows and Howard Bloom. And they ended up at the end said the same thing.
And that's, unfortunately, in this field, that's what we live with.
I mean, you've been studying serial killers most of your life, but when you talk about the fact that what you taught may have inspired this, that's got to be hard for you to process, I would imagine.
It's terrible, very hard. And it's not just what happened to the victims. I really thought Bryan Kohberger was a promising student who really could have made a mark in this career in a very positive way. I thought that. So disappointed, angry, and very shocked that this is who he turned out to be, and horrified for the victims and their families. Just horrified. I mean, I worked with Dennis Rader closely for 5 years. I met the victims' families. I saw the devastation that these kinds of acts can have, and I have to always keep that in mind when I'm teaching these subjects.
What did you think when you first heard that Bryan Kohberger, your former student, was arrested for this?
I was completely floored. I didn't believe it. And his demeanor that we saw on media was that he was confident that he was going to be able to prove his innocence. So I wanted to wait and see. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. But as months go by and he kept saying that he had an alibi, and I wondered, well, why are you sitting in jail? Give us your alibi, get out. And that wasn't happening. And then it was really when he said his alibi, and it was clearly not an alibi, and he would have known that, certainly from all the classes that he had through undergraduate and graduate work. He would have understood that wasn't really an alibi. I think that was when I was really, floored that this is my student who has done these things.
So she wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, and it wasn't until the alibi and the lack thereof. I mean, a lot of us saw that too, like, hey, if you have an alibi, why aren't you telling people? So not only that you can get out, but they can move on to somebody else, right? Obviously, it's a big mistake if you have an alibi. A lot of the Kohbergers were, trying to connect some dots there that weren't there for what the reason was that he couldn't come up with an alibi. Many of them didn't make sense. Many of them didn't make sense because it wasn't something that you could make sense to. But, even though she taught him and even though she had a personal relationship, she looked at the evidence and the facts and the things that he was and was not doing. And that told her even early on in this case, because it was very early on when he wasn't giving an alibi. It was fairly early on that there was that argument going back and forth and back and forth. And the Kohbergers got swayed because Ann Taylor was asking for discovery. Right. And now we know what that discovery was. But she was asking for discovery, and Bill Thompson and the prosecution couldn't give it to her because it was the advanced timing records for Bryan Kohberger's phone. Now, the reason they couldn't give it to her is because the advanced timing records for AT&T expired after 7 days. And they didn't figure out who Bryan Kohberger was until December 19th. So there was no way to figure out what his advanced timing records were on November 13th. They'd been over a month away. So the defense they hired Cy Rain, who was like, oh, well, they should know, because he knew about these supposed backdoor secret tunnels that FBI can use in order to get advanced timing records for a longer period of time. But as the judge said, it was just a conspiracy theory, and it was based on no facts, and in fact, it was evidence to contradict what he was saying. And they had subpoenas and they had witnesses to testify to that from AT&T as far as that goes. But because Ann Taylor was asking for things that didn't exist and was yelling it out loud with confidence, it allowed a lot of the Kohbergers to believe that there was something that prosecution was holding back. And they thought that made the decision to withhold the alibi an appropriate one. It still made no sense, because even if, let's just say that they had the advanced timing records and they were holding them, what does that make a difference as to why you would want to give your alibi? I mean, it's not like your alibi should change based on what's on those records, if they do in fact have them. See, I think that was what his fear was. I think his fear was that they were going to be able to pull something from them, regardless, maybe because even though he turned off his phone and all those other things, I think he may have had a fear that they were going to pull something off of that, and that he was going to say he was somewhere, that the possible call advance records were going to show he wasn't. And so I think that's probably a more logical explanation as to why they didn't want to give it up so much. But yeah, he wanted to hold on. He wanted to wait. Another one is because, let's just say he would have said, I drove through this town over here. Well, if he says that right away, which town he drove through, then law enforcement possibly can go and recuperate or retrieve, footage from that town to see if he actually drove into it. Now, if he waits long enough and then he says, oh, I was at the Wildlife Park and the only camera that's there was already recorded, or whatever the case may be, maybe he's hoping that, given the length of time that he had waited to give his alibi, that those things would no longer be available to law enforcement. And so you couldn't prove it one way or another. I think that's one of the other aspects to why he didn't want to give up the alibi. And also because he didn't have one, obviously. And so, a lot of the Kohbergers, like I mentioned, though, they thought that because prosecution may have been hiding something, that was reason to withhold your alibi, which still don't make sense, because if his alibi was exculpatory, they would have been able to get him out of jail and look for the real person, regardless if the prosecution was withholding things, right? So it was a weird argument to make, and it was a weird argument for those that followed it and believed it, to be 110% honest with you.
You mentioned, you studied BTK, the serial killer. You met with him many times in prison. This is what you do in a hope to prevent these things from further happening and understand the mind of a serial killer. Would you want to study Bryan Kohberger? Have you put any thought into that? Is that something that you think could be possible?
I've been thinking about that for 2.5 years. I would. This is my work. If he wanted to do that, I would. And within the framework of this is what we do to try to look at developmental trajectories, the triggers, so that we can.
You see, so she would do it. She's thought about it for years, and to me, she knows, like, probably more than anybody else, what makes like a narcissist serial killer tick. What gets them going? What makes them want to work with you? And so I'm wondering if all this stuff that she's saying about Bryan Kohberger tricking her, fooling her, she didn't see the red flags, blah, 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 is a way to get in with him. Like, hey, how did you fool me? We want to study you. We want to know everything. And this is just a buttering up, so to speak. Right? Could that be it? I can't say that it's not it. You know what I mean? Wicked comes in saying, I think BK doing a lot of his DeSalle studies online hit his red flags. That's also possible too. But I think by the time he took Catherine Rams on, I think those were in person. Michelle Bolger, who's the one that referred him to the PhD program at WSU, had a lot of his classes online. But I'm not sure about Dr. Ramsland, if she did or not.
see the red flags faster, we can prevent people like this from wreaking the havoc that they do. So if he wanted to do that, I know that he's got the intellectual capacity to do it, to be self-reflective, to help think through how his life came to this.
Again, I wonder if she's talking to him through Brian Ensign, knowing that this guy is full of himself and he's going to watch this interview about Dr. Ramsland, especially if he was admired about her. I mean, you know, what did he watch? He watched Ted Bundy. And if it had Ted Bundy and the Idaho murders, he watched that too. And so why wouldn't he watch Bryan Kohberger and his favorite psychologist? Right. So is she talking to him like, I know, yeah, and using big words and things like that. I know he has the intellectual power to do this at blah, 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 blah. It kind of sounds like she's talking to him. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want to say there's nothing wrong with that. This is her profession. This is how, because if she does land this, right, and then she goes and studies him, who else would you want to study somebody who is like Bryan Kohberger, but somebody who's the most experienced and well-renowned? I would say, you know, it'd be her. I'm not saying what she's doing is wrong either, you know, and maybe perhaps she can uncover some things from Bryan Kohberger because he may have not have that guard up and things like that. So there's a lot of possibilities there. I'm not saying if it's her, you know, it's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying that's what it kind of seems to me is what's going on here.
Think through how his life came to this. And so I would definitely do it if he were willing, and it would be hard. But I think because I have so much material from him, I have questions for him that I think nobody else but me could ask.
I have questions for him that nobody else but me could ask. But she does have a point. Like, that guard would be down. You know, they know each other. There's a history there. I think that she wouldn't have to work as hard to get him to open up or than, for instance, somebody else. You know, now I'm not saying that it wouldn't be impossible. You know, somebody said Dr. Bucato. That's another good one. That would be a good one, you know, to go in there and question him. But who would get the most out of him? You get what I'm saying? And I think, right, you know, faster definitely would be Dr. Ramsland. Overall, I don't know. I mean that's a difficult question, right? If that's a different question, but who would get more information out quicker? I would say Dr. Ramsland.
And just my last question, Dr. Ramsland. I mean, you are the person that I think of who, if anyone could see through someone and see that they have a secret side, I would think it would be you, because this has been your life's work, and trying to figure that out. And in a sense, it almost feels like
he's saying what I'm saying.
Kohberger, even had you fooled.
Well, I study the ones who are really good at it because I want to truly try.
She can't help it but smirk a little bit. I think that actually kind of got to her, that he said that in a sense you got fooled.
Even had you fooled.
Well, I study the ones who are really good at it because I want to truly try to understand what can we see in the constellation of behaviors that will tip us off earlier, because people who are really good at passing as normal and keeping their dark side hidden can fool people, can fool all the experts for a long period of time. I think anybody in my field will tell you they can be duped by a really skillful, predatory type of person. So
if you don't think you can be duped, you probably are. Multiple times, you know, and so she makes a valid point. You have to keep all your options open. You have to not get closed-minded, not jump to conclusions. That's one of the things. I'm covering the Jack and Lily case right now. Jack and Lily Sullivan disappearance out of Nova Scotia, Canada. And so many of the folks that are watching that case just kind of jump to a conclusion really fast without thinking it out. It reminds me a lot of the Kohbergers, where the Kohbergers would hear or see something, and just because it made sense to a certain extent, like in the forefront, and it didn't make sense when you analyzed it with all the evidence, very similar in that case. It's very almost toxic to a certain extent with some of these folks that have certain opinions that are going against, just like, you know, the same thing, going against law enforcement statements, not agreeing with what law enforcement says, agreeing more with what they thought in the beginning and not willing to change their mind because they don't want to admit they were wrong. You know, a lot of that. It's so insane. It's insane. My block list has gotten pretty high now. Again, what's going on, Artworks? Good to see you, my man. It's been a minute. I haven't seen you in a second. Good to see you here. And then we got Allie Brooks also in here. Thank you, Allie, for being here for 13 months and 16 months. You guys are awesome.
You know, I'm not going to say I'm the person who can spot this. I can see things like if you have a rigid personality and you're threatening, you know, those are red flags that are very clear. Or you have a mental instability and you're drawing, you know, violent images. These are things we can see and we can anticipate. But if somebody's presenting themselves as a completely normal human being engaged in life the way, you know, according to our expectations, it's really hard to see through that. And as a teacher, I am not initially suspicious that students are there for the wrong reasons. And so I think some of us have what I would call a cognitive disadvantage because we are giving the benefit of the doubt.
I agree and disagree. I agree that you're not there analyzing everybody, but you should be out on the lookout for red flags. At the end of the day, your students are somewhat your responsibility to a certain extent. And I would think that, you know, if we took Bryan Kohberger out of it, if a professor saw interest in some behavior out of a student, and it doesn't even have to be a TA student, but out of a male student towards a female student, and then, you know, they suspect certain things, I feel that they should react. They should act. They should be conscientious of those things around them, their surroundings, because they do have a responsibility to the other students on campus as well. You know, this is supposed to be a safe place. And unfortunately, like in places like college campuses and things like that, forced sexual acts happened. You know, there's a term for it. YouTube don't like it, so we're not going to say it. It starts with an R. But those things happen. And, you know, if there's a teacher that suspects something and or sees something and doesn't say anything about it or doesn't bring it up to anybody's attention, if they see any type of predatorial type of behavior, you definitely need to act. I mean, I think what WSU did was the right thing to do when they getting rid of Bryan Kohberger. You know, they got rid of him within a semester. They were fairly quickly. They worked fairly quick. Now, I don't like their response to the families. I don't like their response to, you know, their sorry or their public statements and things like that. I also think that they may have been aware of Bryan Kohberger before and, you know, before he was arrested as a possible. I find it weird that they would have not looked at him as a possible suspect or not think of him as one, because this is why. The now WSU chief of police is or was the Pullman Police Department chief at the time. And at the time, the same chief was talking to the senior leads of the WSU. These people would have been the same people, and he was talking to them referencing the Moscow case, trying to give them updates and things of that nature of what they got. The same guy was also talking to the same senior leads who would have been disciplining and firing Bryan Kohberger because they're the ones that made the decision on it. And this same chief of police in an interview said that he was aware of one situation where Bryan Kohberger had done something, but he's like, it wouldn't even have been something criminal. It was, you know, his behavior, the way he looked at people, this, that, and a third. My thoughts were, how does that get to the chief of police? You know, this was the same chief who was in the process of hiring Bryan Kohberger. Now, he says he didn't hire him because of one reason or another, but for him to have known that Bryan Kohberger was socially awkward, that certain people had certain things that, you know, he stood weird or he stood too close, for him to have known that tells me he was investigating him most likely for the background check on his intern police job. Now, he ended up not getting selected, and the Pullman police chief, current WSU police chief, said that it was because he was socially awkward and he didn't think he'd fit in. I tend to think that he knew more about Bryan Kohberger and his background. If he was aware of some of those things and he's talking to those senior leads that are dealing with him, I 100% believe that he was aware of more than what he's alluding to. 100%. But you guys tell me what you guys think once you factor in all the evidence there. what he was and who he was talking to and what was going on in both of their situations, because Bryan Kohberger was applying for a police intern police position. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that was in the spring, Daniel. There's that interview or the email. But the PCA talks about the essay that he put in when he applied in the fall. So I don't doubt that he applied in the spring, but I think he applied again in the fall. And I think that the same chief of police that was making that decision on whether or not he was going to hire Bryan Kohberger or not was doing a background check, talking to the people that Bryan Kohberger or the people that were firing Bryan Kohberger, not just about Bryan, but also about Moscow. And how do you not connect those dots? How do you not connect those dots? Now, when did they fire him? December 19th. That's when they officially fired him. That's when they sent out the letter. Now, Bryan Kohberger's dad bought a plane ticket on December 10th to fly out on December 11th to head out to Bryan Kohberger's. He also bought another plane ticket on January 20th to fly back from Pullman to Philadelphia, meaning he was anticipating on doing another cross-country drive with Bryan Kohberger at the end of January and then flying back. And so when he made those plans and that decision was before December 19th. That was before Bryan Kohberger was officially terminated. December 19th was the day that that Moscow Police Department found out about Bryan Kohberger and his name. And according to interviews with the former Pullman police chief, current WSU police chief, he found out shortly after because Chief Fry called him and told him they got him. So, to me, you can easily connect those dots there. I think they knew, and I think they knew more. And I think that there's a good possibility that it shouldn't even have taken 7 weeks or 6 weeks to find him and arrest him. It could have been quicker.
To students, and I think that's certainly what happened. That's why I would want to work with him and study him, because I want to understand how he was able to completely fool me.
It didn't come from Reddit. I know where it came from. They got it from where I got it from. I mean, they probably got it from me, to be honest with you, and put it on Reddit. I got his plane tickets. I got his emails. I got some things. It was definitely real. And the thing about it too was that Bryan Kohberger was when he drove back, one of his students asked him like, "Hey, can you something about a grade or something of that nature?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm getting ready to. I'll take care of it. I'm getting ready to, get ready for a plane ride back home." I think that was the initial plan. I think the initial plan was for Bryan Kohberger to fly back home, and what ended up happening is the BOLO comes out on December 7th for the Elantra, and now he knows he can't go back home without his car and leaving it there. So manipulates the situation so that way he can get his dad to decide to come all the way down and pick him up, and they take the car out of the area. 100% my belief in that. And that's the end of that interview. I got a couple things more I wanted to show you guys. Real quick. Just a few more things, a couple more updates I wanted to show. Oh, I was like, where is it at? I got it. I didn't send it yet. Jeez Louise. My mistake, guys. I'm about to send it right now. Okay, there's two things I wanted to show you guys before we call it a show that I think you guys might get a kick out of when it comes to this case. Well, one thing you might get a kick out of. The other thing is just an update. So let's pull up. Let's look at the kick first. And they still don't give it up, guys. They still don't give it up. The Kohbergers, that is. So this was recently brought to my attention that some Kohberger put this out there. They saw a guy with a beard, right, on the 11/13/2022 on some I guess body cam. They saw a guy with a beard and they were like, "Oh my God, this is Bryan Kohberger." Bryan Kohberger was outside BK's apartment just a couple hours before the murders occurred. Here he is on body cam footage taken from the hit and run that took place literally on Bryan's doorstep. Another thing I found strange is there's no timestamp of the body cam footage, only dates. It says 8:50:37 Z. So I mean that's like some random. I mean not random, but that's like world time or whatever. Well, anyways, this puts Brent directly in BK's path. BK left his apartment as this was taking place. That's not true. This shows a connection between the two. This does not show a connection between the two. If this shows a connection between the two, one, this isn't Bryan Kohberger, but two, let's just say it was. Then Bryan Kohberger is connected to thousands of people, everybody that he's come in contact with, everybody that he's drove by, everybody, which would include the victims, because on several occasions he was parked outside of their house, right? So he was about the same distance as Bryan Kohberger, and I'm putting this in quotations, as to Bryan Kohberger's apartment in this image as Bryan Kohberger was on several occasions to the victim's house. So based on this idiotic logic here, Bryan Kohberger is connected to the victims then, right? Oh my gosh, people are so dumb. In my opinion, I don't believe this is coincidence, but what are the chances that this guy is outside of Bryan's apartment in the early hours of the 13th? Then Brent gets murdered by the police. No, he doesn't. He was not murdered by the police. He shot at law enforcement, and he took action against law enforcement. Law enforcement followed suit. This is a cover-up of huge magnitude. Oh my God, people are dumb. Bigger than Bryan Kohberger and bigger than the 4 victims. The only thing bigger than that is probably your waist, man. So here we go. This is supposedly Bryan Kohberger. Man, people just drive me nuts with the stupid stuff that they put out there. They won't give it up. Huge thing. Now, one of the things we do know is that the Barnharts, the Cellbrite couple that were going to be called to testify for against Bryan Kohberger, indicated that Bryan Kohberger wasn't home that night. And there's also a receipt for Walmart at 12 o'clock. They said that he was somewhere, but he wasn't at home. He didn't go, leading up to the, and also in the court documents, when they refer to this incident, the hit and run that was outside of Bryan Kohberger's apartment complex, one of the things that they point out is that Bryan Kohberger had a history of parking in the same spot, and where law enforcement had parked, had he been home or had his vehicle been home, it would have been in the view of the dash cam footage, and it wasn't. So there you go. It wasn't. So he wasn't there. And then Barnharts have said that through his cell device, they can determine that he wasn't home either. I don't know where he was, but he wasn't home. So all the stuff that's here is just lies and misunderstandings. The idiocracy is real. Next thing I wanted to show you guys, and this is from the Goncalves family page, Kaylee and Maddie's urns. Karen also has 2 urns for both girls. We're going to go to the crematorium on Wednesday so they can split them. I will have Kaylee have a Kaylee urn and a Maddie urn. Karen will have the same. We are splitting them, not mixing them. Those are beautiful. Those are beautiful urns. So sad. May they rest in peace. All righty, guys. Well, I'll be here for the next 5-10 minutes. Ask your questions. Put a couple stars. I'm going to put the link after the show for the Discord. So if you want to be a new member, click the membership and check out the playlist the posts, the community post on the membership only. And we'll have a Discord link here momentarily. In fact, you know what? I'll start doing that process now. I'll put it in now. So that way, if you are a member, all you got to do is just go to the community post here in a second, and you'll see that link. And for now, hit me up with your questions, comments, and concerns. Put them in the comment box, and let me see what you guys have to say. I want to see what y'all's opinion on things are. It's been a while since we talked about Kohberger, so what's on your mind? And the Discord link is in the post, community post. Can opener comes in with great show, better than watching the Browns game. I don't know about that one. I thought that was a very good game. It was a good game. You know, in all reality, the Browns have a very, very young team. I think Dylan Gabriel is going to be all right. You know, their offensive line is still pretty good. Judkins is he's a pretty good running back too. You know, I think you guys are going to be okay. Just got to grow a little bit. There's going to be some growing pains. You know what I'm saying? But I think they're going to be okay. Just maybe not this year. Let's see. Yes. Thank you, Extreme Blonde. Appreciate that. Hey, Barbara Hall's in the building. How's it going, Barbara? And a couple of things that I wanted to talk about also, we're going to be covering. I'm going to talk tomorrow night about Lily and Jack Sullivan's disappearance. And then here soon, I'm going to have True Crime Hillbilly, I want to say is her YouTube account. I apologize if I got that backwards. But she's been covering the sheriff that shot the judge out there in Kentucky. We're going to be kind of deep diving into that as well. I'm still talking about the Timothy Dees case. There's a lot more to cover in that case as well. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, guys, so you guys can see it all. Let's see. Mitch comes in saying, is there any way to see the response to a survey? We want to know the answers and how criminals choose their victims. Wonder if 122 fits with anything he learned from them. That's a good question. That's a really good question. Hillbilly Crime. There we go. Thank you, Extreme Blonde. Thank you, Mitch, for being a member for 24 months. That's a really good question, though, Mitch, or observation. I would have wanted to see it, too. I don't think it was coming up, but it would have been nice to have seen it. Daniel, check out Laura Brand. She conducted the biggest study on serial killer in the U.S. person interviews. Oh, wow. I'm not familiar with who she is. I'm going to look her up. Thank you, Truth. Appreciate that. Travis comes in saying Moscow, Idaho would be 7 UTC-Z during standard time, 6 hours when it's MDT. Awesome. Well, if you want to do some quick math, this was at just before 9. T at the end says Z. So just before 9 be minus 6 hours. So like 3 in the morning, I guess. I would have been right before Bryan Kohberger was already gone. Daniel, check out. Oh yeah, sorry, saw that one. Axion is one of the top 3 worn body camera systems used by agencies across the U.S. Good deal. I didn't know that. You know, when I was in law enforcement, that was before body cameras. I'm super old school. Like, don't take the boyish good looks, and I'm a little bit older than I look, I guess. When I first started, we were still using VHS. That's how long ago it was. So a lot of things have changed since I've been in or been out. And you know, we had VHS cameras. When I left, we had disc. So that's kind of the era where I was. And so Bullish in Seattle. I do love your channel for your point of view. I do look at different views of creators. Thank you. Appreciate that. Holly Day, do you think he would do an interview with her and give details? I don't think he will ever, because then he loses that power over the victims' families. I think he would. I just don't know how honest he would be. Right? So that would still be regaining power. Like, I think he would give some details. Some might be true, some might be false, and some might be things that he keeps to himself. And that's one of the reasons why the judge and Bill Thompson didn't want to have him do something like Dennis Rader did, you know, and get up there in court and explain his point of view, or a nice point of view, but what happened. Because it could have been something that he ended up being gratified by, He could have taken enjoyment by it. And two, there's no way of knowing if he's being honest either. You know what I'm saying? So I completely understand it. I think they should have forced him to give up some things like what he did with the knife and things that can't come back to, like, what were you thinking? You know, things you can prove, right? Like if he buried the knife, go find it, right? Which I think he did, because I think that if he threw it into the river, he's losing control, right? And for a man that wants nothing but control, I think that even if he never goes back for it, him knowing where it's at and the fact that he could potentially retrieve it is power and control. So I think there are certain things that they could have gotten out of him that wasn't, why questions, and more so like what did you do? Things that you can end up proving, right? Like how did you not get DNA? What did you use to clean it? Now, I'm sure that they're going to be able to pull up the chemicals and stuff, so they may have an idea. But what else did he do? There's certain things that I would like to, like, I'm sure law enforcement want to know the answer to. Very similar to the questions he had asked, but a lot of those questions aren't things you can prove, right? Like, how did you choose your victims? How do you know what he's going to say is the truth? Whether he says, I chose him because I like Maddie, or I chose him because I like Kaylee, or I chose him because of whatever the reason may be. It could be 1, 2, 3, or all of them. And we don't know if they're completely separate from what any of those options could be. So I get it, but I would have liked to have seen more. I would have liked to have seen more things you can prove, basically. Jay Gyllenhaal should play BK if the movie is done. Watching one of his movies now, and he gives giving the BK creeps. So like Donnie Darko or what? Let me know if it's Donnie Darko. Kohberger is an idiot. Bottom line, I agree. I agree. Nightcrawler. Oh, that's a good one too. Nightcrawler. That's probably it. It's more recent. And it was Nightcrawler. There you go. Nightcrawler. Donnie Darko's a good one too, if you guys haven't seen it. Hey, Trina, how's it going? Generally, they have to prove something, or someone else can't try to claim the crime. They want to prove it was him. Yeah. Why did BK and his dad drive through Colorado? To me, my opinion, he went through the Grand Tetons. He went through Colorado. I wouldn't be surprised if he went through some of the places that Ted Bundy went through, because that's kind of the route he went. He went through Colorado, right? He went into the Grand Tetons. He kind of followed where he went. I think that might have something to do with it, to be honest with you. If I had to take a guess, it was that. Most prison systems, disappeared. Most prison systems have a victim offender mediation program. It is completely voluntary, but if it happens, it's about the only thing that will help family members. You would be surprised. Let's see. Who has participated? It's used in Texas all the time. I've seen it used in other places. I think there was one that this guy who lost his two kids and a niece to a drunk driver. And I think this happened like in Australia, and they were doing a victim offender type of situation where they talk to each other and stuff. And it got me an interesting perspective. It gave me an interesting perspective because the guy has forgiven his children's killer, and he's serving like 25 years. I think he's already served like 10 or 12. And they've actually become, I guess, friends, and what he had said was that if it was up to him, that he would allow his children's killer to go, to be free. He's already dealt with the guilt and everything else. It was, he wasn't like an alcoholic or anything like that. It was a young guy that made a mistake, which cost some people their lives. So he deserves every bit of time that he got. And I don't disagree with that. But one of the things that he mentioned was that when it comes to punishment of the accused or the convicted at that point, that he felt that the punishment was more to gratify the public than it was, and the community than it was the victim. That people in the public want to see more time because of the crime and whatnot. And to a certain extent, I think that they're right. You know, in the Bryan Kohberger case, I think that had they gone to trial and Bryan Kohberger get off, I think that would have, I think that possibility scared the living crap out of the prosecution. And if that were to happen, I think that would scare the living crap out of the community and everybody there. Cause let's just say that he would have gotten off, acquitted, walked out, you know, and there was no other options. I know that Steve was working with the feds, and he was trying to navigate other options if that were to have been the case. And I'm not sure how far they would have gone with those options or not, but let's just say worst case scenario happened, you know, the community would be in a lot of trouble. So to a certain extent, you know, taking a plea deal, you know, although some of the victims' family members didn't want one, to a certain extent kind of feels like that, right? Like serving the community, making sure that they feel that justice was served, so to speak, right? Versus what the victim may have wanted to have. But that was the perspective I got out of that. Holiday says he was obsessed and wanted to be like Ted Bundy. 100%. 100%. All righty, guys. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody. It's been good to talk to all of you guys again. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. If more stuff pops up on Bryan Kohberger, we'll talk about it. But tomorrow I have intentions of talking about Jack and Lily Sullivan and their disappearance. I got some new information about that case. I'm actually talking to a few more people as well, some that are a little bit closer than others to the case, and onto both sides of the parents' side of things. And so I got some news for you about the case that I'll be sharing tomorrow. So please hit the like button, subscribe, ring that notification bell. I'll see you guys tomorrow night. New members, the Discord link is in the community post. Go check it out. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.